So today's myth is how specific exercises are claimed to target specific fat loss. So today's myth, we're talking about how people claim you can do specific exercises to target fat loss. What's the go? When we eat less than we need, or what we provide for our body, the body searches for energy from within. These energy stores can be found from blood glucose, glycogen within the muscle and in the liver, amino acids, ketones, free fatty acids, triglycerides. These are energies that are found within the blood or stored within tissue. We get these energy sources from more macroscopic food content, and generally we call these proteins, carbs, and fats. As we lose fat, our body finds these fat cells full of usable energy, which will then liberate into the bloodstream for use. We also have fat cells within the muscles called intramuscular triglycerides, or IMTG if you read the research. We have white, brown, and beige fat cells as well. The types are important because they kind of have a little bit different metabolic differences, but the ones that we're going to focus on and the ones that we will lose from the most will be white adipose tissue and some intramuscular triglycerides. The types are important as they all have different metabolic processes going on, but for the rest of this video we're just going to refer to white adipose tissue as fat. Our body will dictate a bit of priority when it comes to storing body fat, and unfortunately it goes to intramuscular triglycerides first, or at least at the same rate as it does body fat. This is where some people claim that they look better after a cheat day. It's because they've eaten a meal that's full of carbohydrates, fat, sodium, protein, generally filled those up and are looking a little bit more full. But they think logically that the food was junk food, therefore full of fat, that this has had some filling effect. Whilst it might be small, it's really not something to be concerned about, and it's probably ill-placed. But that's for another video. There are a few ways we may see body fat being represented. There are also varying ranges as to which we'll see these body fat types being expressed and how pronounced or reduced you'll see these expressions. Type 1, no particular distribution. We kind of see people putting on fat in this type all over their body, nice and evenly. It doesn't seem to accumulate in any one area. Number 2, excess subcutaneous fat. This is the fat that's under our skin there, and that excess subcutaneous fat is found on top of the abdominals. This is the one that we will typically class as android obesity, and you'd typically see this in mostly males, though you'd see it in females as well, depending on their hormonal profile. Number 3, excess fat storage in the visceral cavity. Now this is different to number 2 because it's not subcutaneous. This is in the visceral cavity around the organs within the abdominal. Now this is termed as abdominal obesity. Number 4, gluteofemoral obesity. This is the female obesity type, or the gynoid type obesity. We typically see this mostly in females, it can be expressed in males, and it's the fat storage that occurs around the upper thigh, the glutes, and hips. Of course, the range from this total fat mass can be very extreme and different. A 26 BMI looks very different to a 50 BMI, and you'll see these categories being displayed to varying degrees within that. In healthy people, these categories are there, presented, but they're way less pronounced. So you might need things like skin folds measurements, waist-hip ratio, or even DEXA measurements to be able to tease out the differences. Let's talk about the different sites of fat. Visceral fat is the fat that we store around our organs within the abdominal cavity. Now this is the fat that we actually mobilize first, and as it has easy access to the venous portal system, is dumped as free fatty acids into the blood. This gives rise to the credence that when people are starting to lose weight, they don't typically see changes in their body composition straight away, but the scale's going down. So it answers the question of where is the fat coming from that you're burning off when in a calorie deficit. The reason for the higher breakdown going on in your visceral cavity in both healthy and obese people is the exposure of hormones there that increase the fat loss effect that is going on at that site. But it's not all good. There is also increased fat reuptake as well. So unless those fatty acids are utilized when they are broken down and moved into the bloodstream, the body will take them back up and store them. The next fat type is subcutaneous. So this is the fat that we see under our skin. After our visceral fat, Subcutaneous is the next fat store that we start to utilize. Blood flow is a little bit higher in the peripherals of the body, and its insulin sensitivity and glucose availability is also a little bit higher. So this is where you'll typically see people losing from forearms, biceps, shoulders, calves, and the lower thighs first. Some other factors that help out utilizing fat in these areas is insulin exposure, glycogen exposure, up or down regulation of cyclic adenosine monophosphate, or catecholamine exposure. The last factor that really matters for these fat cells is also the expression of alpha-2 and beta-2 adrenoreceptors. Adrenaline receptors from the catecholamine hormone, and how much they are expressed will determine if the body is able to utilize more or less fat. This will be a super basic overview, so if you're really interested in this topic, check out the studies below in the description box. If the fat cells have good adrenaline receptivity, that is a high beta-2 and a low alpha-2 adrenoreceptors, they will be able to easily broken down. And fat cells that have low beta-2 and high alpha-2 adrenoreceptors have poor mobilization, and that thus are the slowest to break down and move. They're the ones that will appear to shift last in someone's fat loss phase. With these things to consider, it's kind of understandable now why the body doesn't just lose body fat very uniform across the body. It ebbs and flows depending on the priority of the person and how much available fat stores that they have. So the concept that you could be doing crunches for 30 minutes to shred your abs is kind of wrong. As we know, local fat usage from exercise only occurs down in the milligrams. So to make a training session to occur like that in the hope that your abs are going to be shredded is kind of misguided. But not only that, if that was how it worked, why wouldn't we see real life examples of this going on? Could you imagine some like high level athlete who uses one arm over the other having completely different fat storage going on? We have a lot of athletes around it, and if that was the case of how the body operated, why don't we see it? Why doesn't Roger Federer have a really fat left arm and a really diced shredded right arm from all his serves? There are of course people that will try and sell you on a concept or an idea or a way of doing it so that you get this happening. Maybe a supplement company selling some cream, or maybe someone selling a training program that targets fat. It's kind of bullshit. What you are really going to see is fat loss disappearing from inside your visceral cavity, that getting smaller first, then you'll start to see some leaning up of your forearms, your arms. Females will get their shoulders really lean. Guys generally will start seeing like quad teardrops at the bottom of their thighs there. And then the upper areas of the thighs, or the lower abdominals and lower back, will be the last to move, and that's okay. So what can you do about it? I know everything that I was talking about before makes it seem helpless, but there is some stuff you can do. One thing that you can do is actually keep dieting. If you achieve down to a lower body fat level than from when you started, and you're lean in some areas that you really like and you don't want to get leaner in those, but say your legs aren't as lean and you definitely want to get leaner in those, the thing you're going to have to do is diet further down. You're going to have to diet until you get to the point where your legs start to come into the level of leanness that you're after. Then from there, you might want to have a maintenance break or some refeeds or even a surplus, depending on how you set yourself up. But you want to do some time away from it. Now, in this maintenance, surplus, or regaining phase, you're going to see fat loss being stored back in the areas that you've tried to lose from. That's okay. You can do this in slow, steady fashions so that all the fat doesn't get stored straight back there. By being silly and finishing a fat loss phase and going straight into a high bulking phase, or straight into a surplus eating with uncontrollable intakes, you're going to see fat loss occur fast in the areas that you just tried to get down. I know that sucks to hear. You've dieted down all this way, got down to the point where you're happy with particular portions of your body and not so happy with some, and to only hear that you have to diet more, I know it sucks, but it's actually the most honest truth you're going to get. If you do that, what you will see is this shift in how you store fat and how you mobilize fat. Now, what I'm talking about here is a difference in nutrient partitioning and fat repatterning. Myself and other coaches who do bodybuilding and physique athletes, we see this quite a lot in people that go from being in a normal healthy body fat range, those diet down to competition level, and then when they come back up, we see a totally different shift in their body fat patterning. Guys tend to store less fat around their abs and lower back. Women tend to store less in their thighs. That's if and when we control their body fat coming back up. For those that don't have a coach or do this and overshoot the fat that they started off with, well, of course, they're going to end up with more. But that's why you should have a coach to help you work through these things. So I mentioned before that after you've gotten down and you've finished dieting, there's going to be this small fat regain that's going to occur. This is unavoidable. You can't stop your body from storing any body fat in that post-dieting phase. What you can do is make sure you optimize macronutrients, make sure that you keep up your training intensity, and you return back to your normal activity levels throughout your day, and that will minimize what's going on. Then from there, you can do a solid maintenance or a small surplus phase, and you can prioritize the nutrients where you want to go. Now that you're a leaner in body fat, your body actually partitions nutrients a little bit better, and less is pushed towards fat gain and more is pushed towards lean muscle gain, especially if you're doing some weight training. By sticking down to your diet for about 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to solidify this new low body fat level. What you will discover in this maintenance phase is if this is actually sustainable for you. Everyone thinks that they can diet down from 20% to 10% and just chill there. But guess what? Your environment and your genetics determine if this is going to be possible. So sit in this maintenance phase for 2 to 4 weeks, and what you'll find is an understanding of where your body likes to sit. You may find yourself ravenous and hungry, and your body's trying to shift you up to a higher body fat percentage. Or you may find it quite comfy and quite easy and adopt to it quite well. You won't know until you actually achieve it and then try this maintenance phase out. So to recap, no, you can't lose fat from a specific area. We lose fat kind of from our visceral cavity first, then our subcutaneous, and from more sensitive areas and greater blood flow, greater adrenaline receptivity. And then as we get leaner and leaner, this shifts closer and closer to essential body fat levels, and areas like upper thighs, glutes, lower backs, or abdominals for everyone, for males and females separately, you will see that coming in last. The honest truth is, you can just keep dieting through it to get rid of it and then control it coming back up. Yes, this is closer to physique level body conditioning, but it's up to you to determine how much fat is enough for your body. Then from there, try and solidify it for 2 to 4 weeks, and what will happen is you'll discover if you can actually maintain this phase. From there, you can either start growing again, or you can continue on just chilling there for the rest of your life. Happy now that you can maintain this new low body fat levels and sit down with a better body composition. And that wraps up today's video, guys. I hope you found it useful. Make sure to like and subscribe. Check out down below in the description box for our Facebook links, Instagram, other cool stuff that we got going on. There's a bunch of studies down there for you guys to go deeper into this topic here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.